I DNF'd my first ultra marathon attempt at 50 miles. This last weekend, I competed in the View 50-mile ultra in Sedona, Arizona. And unfortunately, I did not complete the 50-mile goal, but I sure did go home with a lot of learned lessons, knowledge, and a heart full of gratitude. I'm going to break down in this video the weeks leading up to this, the days before, the during, and how I'm feeling now after participating in the longest race literally of my life. Up until this training block that I got prepared for this ultra, I had ran for over a decade. It was 12 years. In college, I had the Uncle Rico story, 4 back surgeries. I've had essentially a laundry list of injuries and pains and hurts and all these different things. And so after college, I really didn't do any sort of endurance workouts other than lifting weights. Now, I did go and lift heavy weights, powerlifting. I hit some powerlifting goals, but I was not in endurance sports at all. So I hadn't ran really any mileage for over a decade because I was told by doctors it was bad for me. And then I just also convinced myself that I wasn't a runner and that running sucked, right? We all probably are in a very similar position that running sucks. You hate it. You're not good at it, right? These are stories. You're not built for it. These are stories that we tell ourselves. And I was in the same boat as most people in that same exact position that I wasn't built to be a runner. And maybe I'm not freaking built to be a runner, dude, but I think that those are lofty identities and word choices that we use sometimes to keep ourselves from experiencing things that, yeah, maybe I'm not a world-class runner, and maybe my Strava times aren't impressive to people who are professional runners, but I'm somebody who's going out and giving as much as I possibly can, given the circumstance of where I'm at physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. So runners are freaking runners, man. Doesn't matter what time it is. If you're going out and you're emptying the gas tank and you're giving everything you have and you're being committed and devoted to a program and you're eating and your nutrition and your life is revolving around something, then yes, you are once again, you're part of the group. And so up until this last August, I hadn't ran for over a decade. August came around, I could barely run a mile. Then I participated in a half marathon January of 2026. 13.1 miles was the longest that I had ever ran. I had done one training run, and it was the longest run in training that I had achieved was 10 miles. And I thought that I was dying. I literally was grinding my teeth towards the end just to get done with the 10 miles. We got the 10 miles done. I ended up being injured, having to take a couple months off of training for the half marathon, and then really only put together 4 to 5 weeks of training heading into that half marathon, never running more than even 2 miles at a time, the half marathon pace that I held of 7:55 for the 13.1 miles. After the half marathon in January, I hired world-class ultra marathon athlete as well as coach Adam Kimball to help me prepare for my first ultra event. So I skipped a marathon, I skipped a 50K, and I went straight to the 50-mile attempt. Now, this is probably a lofty goal for most and a stretch for most people's capability. I felt that I could do it safely, and I had asked Coach K in our first initial conversation if he felt that we could titrate training, titrate the mileage, and give me enough time to adapt to the new stimulus with the running that I could prepare myself for a 50-mile ultra essentially 12 weeks after we started. And he said yes, he believed that we could, and it would be a work in progress. And so I put my trust in him. I also put my trust in myself because I was starting to dial in my nutrition, my sleep, my habits, my lifestyle. Everything had to not be perfect, but I had to be a lot more regimented, committed, and focused on creating an environment around myself as well as a daily discipline that was going to be conducive for me to be able to finish the event. So I had to have a goal in mind. That was something that this ultra marathon provided for me, but it was a scary goal. I knew that running 50 miles is a freaking stretch, man. Running inflation is real. If you go on Instagram, if you go on social media, you see these people putting up these crazy mileages, 50, 100, 150, 200, 300, 400 miles. And you feel, holy cow, man, like 50 miles is not that big of a deal. But if you actually break it down, 50 miles is a lot. Have you ever gone out for a 3-mile run? It's a long ways if you're not in shape. 5 miles, even if you're in shape, is a good amount of distance. And so we have inflated these numbers on these 50-mile ultras, but I personally felt that it was a scary number for me. I knew that I could go run 30 miles. I knew it in my heart. But 50 miles I knew was going to have to draw from something greater than myself, the spiritual realm. I knew physically that I could go run 30 miles, but I knew that spiritually I'd have to lean on something greater than myself to be able to accomplish that 50-mile distance. And that's what was more important to me. I was going to have to strip myself of my ego, and I was going to have to really tune and tap into my humility as a man in order to accomplish something that I've never done before. And so I reached out to Coach K. We had a 12-week training block, and for essentially 10 of those 12 weeks, yes, I had some things pop up. I had aches and pains. Yes, I got sick. I missed one training session. Yes, I had a couple boo-boos and a little thing here and there. But honestly, my body was adapting well. I had lost a little body fat. I started to get in shape. My body fat started to drop. My body weight essentially stayed the same. My strength was staying exactly where it was at for when we had started. All things considered, things in terms of the physical preparation and adaptation and progression was going really, really well. One thing I wish I had done sooner was to get on the trails sooner. The trails started to cause a little bit of problems. Now, my accessibility to the trails leading up to this event is not the most ideal. They're about 30 minutes away from my house. I don't have any elevation around my house. So 30 minutes, if you think of a drive, that's an hour total of drive, and even a workout, that's an hour or 2 hours. Now I'm devoting 2 to 3 hours of my day. I'm not a professional runner. I don't get paid to run. I'm just a dad on a mission to be my best self. And so taking 2, 3, 4 hours to go do something, yes, I could do it early in the morning. And I have done that at 4 or 5 in the morning, but to be back, to be on my calls at work on time, I was essentially having to push most of these training sessions until the latter half of my training block, and then getting on the trails on Saturdays when my workload was a bit less. And I decided that I wanted to allocate time towards my training and not being in the job saddle or in the work saddle on Saturday mornings. Now, once I got on the trail, I definitely saw that there was big differences from road running. I didn't need to, we didn't need to address the elephant in the room there, but there's definitely some major differences from running 10 miles on the road versus 10 miles on the trail. There's also so many different variables that are coming up on the trail. One thing that had continuously was a problem was my feet. 15 miles in, and about 2 miles ago, my feet just started to hurt again. I'm gonna have to tough out the last 5 miles here. We're gonna have to figure this whole situation out with my feet. Frustrating, but we're in it. I was having problems under my soles of my feet. I was having problems with blistering. I'd gone through a number of different shoes. I was looking into different taping methods, and I've taped my feet different. And so I was going through this big science project, and what was holding me back on the trails essentially was my feet. Now, what happened 2 weeks ago was I had a really bad calf strain, and this could be an overuse scenario, or this could have been from running on the trails, my feet hurting, and then essentially changing my gait and or running form and creating essentially a chain response up the leg that's going to cause injury. I had a really bad calf strain on the left side of my leg, and it was towards the bottom of the Achilles and then up through like the meat of the calf. And it was pretty dang tender. Now, I had to really back off on a number of training sessions. I couldn't do my last 2 trail runs. So I essentially relied on road running and then being on the bike. And I obviously had accomplished or achieved 10 weeks of training. I had gone through 10 weeks of training up until this point. That really saved me to even be in a position to even think that going and attempting a 50-mile ultra was within the means of possibilities, because the bulk of the training was already done. I'd already peaked the training. We had maxed out the most mileage in a week that we were going to have. And we were in this tapering off process, and the injury happened during the taper. So that has benefit as well as it has its detriment. The benefit is we're already tapering off. So thankfully, we don't need these high mileage or these high output days to stay and maintain in shape or to even get extra fitness. The downside is I just needed a little bit more time on feet. Since I haven't ran a ton in my life and I just started running, all the time on the feet matters. Nonetheless, 2 weeks, I ended up getting some work done by one of the best in the business, and the absolute goat in my mind when it comes to PT and therapy, Dr. Brandon Booth up at ProCare Spine and Sports Therapy. He works on professional athletes, the only guy now that I let touch my body, my back, etc. when it comes to injuries and ensuring that I'm going to be put back together if possible. And he's going to give me real-time feedback if this is even a realistic goal, or if it's just a lofty thing and putting myself in a terrible position. And so this last Tuesday, I got some work done and I left his office. And after we got some work done, I could barely walk. And I'll actually play a video here where it shows how I was walking after that. Now, we done some dry needling in there, essentially trying to cause a little bit of trauma, put some stim in there and to change things around. Now, heading into the weekend, I did not feel very good at all. My legs were still, I was having electrical shots. I was having nerve pain and issues. I was having some weird cramping feelings. I definitely had strains on both sides. And I knew heading into the race that it was going to be really, really hard. Now, with my coach knowing this information, I want to give kudos to him, is he told me that he felt that I owed it to myself to put myself in a position to figure out what I'm ultimately made of. And whatever that, if it was 10 miles, 15 miles, 20 miles, that the outcome is going to be the outcome. And I had the humility to show up to the starting line, not knowing that I wasn't at 100%, but still moving forward with something. And I think that that's a metaphor for life. And so showed up to the starting line knowing that I wasn't at 100%. So what did my diet look like and my nutrition look like heading into the race? 2 to 3 days before the race, I started my carb load. Specifically speaking, 700 grams of carbs 2 days before and 1 day before. The 2 days before carbs of 726 grams was really easy to consume. Now, I don't suggest just following my plan blindly. I have just found in preparation through the training block that 750 grams of carbs 2 days prior to a long effort was going to be the best in terms of carb loading for myself, digestibility, and feeling good whilst I'm on those longer run and those longer efforts. So I have an entire list of things in terms of foods that I'm choosing from on those carb loading days that I eat every single time. I don't really switch it up at all, but I did a little bit when I was in Sedona, and I'll tell you that here in a second. So essentially, I have a list of foods that help me reach that 700 gram threshold in terms of carb loading that I was looking to get prior to these longer efforts. This last week on Friday, the day before the race, when we were traveling to Sedona, with traveling, et cetera, it adds another element. Plus, I have kids, we have family in town. There's a lot of moving parts. You're doing this and you're doing that. And so when I was in Sedona, I had one meal or so that wasn't in complete alignment. It was a turkey club sandwich and some potato chips. So it wasn't like far out of the realm of what I've already been eating, but it wasn't exactly what I had been consuming. And I don't think that really made much of a difference. Now, with my lower activity all of the week and really the 10 to 14 days leading up to the weekend, my digestive tract wasn't as active in terms of elimination as it's been in the past. Not sure what that's all about, but moving into the weekend, I did get a little bit scared because I had 2 carb loading days and I wasn't really having great bowel movements leading into that. And I've historically had, as you can see the poop sock behind me, I've had to make some pit stops on the sides of some trails in the process of my running journey. And so I just knew that I'm probably going to poop a bunch on race day, come race day. And it was just something I was going to have to deal with just because those carbs, the nerves, and the stimulus to the guts and the belly and the intestines is definitely going to get things flowing through the body. So heading into race morning, I didn't sleep very good, had a very low sleep score, probably only got about 4.5 to 5 hours of sleep. That's pretty common for an event. For me, at least, I'm not that great of a sleeper prior to an event. That's something that I'm definitely going to have to improve on. In the morning, I didn't feel that great either. I had some nausea, so I wasn't able to get as much food as I'd like to. And so I only got down maybe 3/4 of a bowl of cream of rice. I got down a thing of carbolin. So maybe about 70 grams of carbs. Typically, I'm shooting for about 100 grams of carbs. And I found that to be like the sweet spot is about 100 grams of carbs prior to these bigger efforts. And the reason I like to load a little bit in the mornings is because fueling during the runs, I know that I've had GI gastrointestinal distress in the past with fueling on longer efforts. So getting a little bit more carbs prehand before I start the big effort has also helped in that process. And so in that morning before the race, I had multiple bowel movements, about 4 bowel movements before we actually left the Airbnb. With that being said, I still felt like I had to go to the bathroom once we got there. But with the warm up and then us getting there was only about 7 minutes before the race was starting. I looked down to the porta potties. Of course, these event, they don't have 40 porta potties there. And there's 180 racers that are towing the line, and there's 12 people in the porta potty line. I was afraid that I was going to miss the start of the race. So I was holding it, if you know what I'm saying. So I was holding it. Now, that didn't serve me too well. All right. And as we started running, there was a couple mistakes that had happened that went down. And I'm going to start to break down that during the race now. So the race starts. Number one, on my watch, I do have the course options on my watch. I had never used that in the past, but I had downloaded the course and I had pulled it up in a mock little scenario, just sitting here to make sure that I had the course on my watch. Essentially, it's a breadcrumb trail on my little Forerunner 165 that I have. I don't have the Mac Daddy Garmin. I have a starter version for a few $100s. And so with that, I wasn't able to access the course maps in the beginning. So I didn't know how to like change it. And I was just going to be reliant on signage and people running the trail, which was the first mistake that I had made. This other mistake that I'd made in the beginning was getting behind a lot of slow people. I probably was in the back third of the race, not realizing that that first section was actually fairly easy. I could have easily started to shave off some minutes in that first section, but we were running down single track trail for the first few miles. Well, essentially the first 4 or 5 miles leading into the first aid station, and it was hard to pass. One side was cliff falling off, beautiful red rocks and scenery. On the other side, it's cactus. So you kind of got to pick your poison, and there was very few areas where you could ultimately make a good pass. And so you did get stuck behind some people. Little did I know, a lot of those people were also running the 34-miler, as well as most of those people weren't going to actually finish the 50-miler. So in the future, I'll know that I need to get in the front of the pack. And if people need to pass me, that could be their problem instead of me trying to have the courtesy of being in the back, not knowing that most of those people aren't going to finish anyway. So probably knowing my competitor base, knowing the amount of people that are finishing and knowing the average times would have been a little bit better. That's just a simple mistake that I had made. And so I definitely wouldn't have got behind most of the people that I'd gotten behind in the beginning. And I would have pushed the pace just a little bit just to get a head jump start on most of those people. So that was number one. Number two is I had to go number two that entire first segment. Now, I'm just saying this with full transparency, if you want to turn me in or not, but you can't really turn me in for anything, is I waited to go poo until we got to that first aid station, which was a big mistake. The reason that was a big mistake was not only because I was essentially channeling my inner Zen to, like, as it would come up, I'd breathe through it. The good thing is the Imodium takes away a little bit of the urgency and the bite that comes with the feeling of having to go to the bathroom. I got to the aid station and ended up having to go to the bathroom at the porta potty, which caused about a 5 to 7 minute delay, which I only wanted to be at that first aid station like maybe 60 seconds. So there's another 5-6 minutes on that first segment. I probably could have squeezed out another 5. So that's another 5 to 10 minutes right there of inefficient running and planning. That next segment, we ran fairly well. It started to open up after that. I should have just pooed in the bushes and would have saved that time. We get to the third aid station, which is the first time that I actually got to see my dad and my wife, which is my crew. And at that point in time, at 15.5 miles, I'd already started really blistering bad around my heels, and my calf was starting to really seize up. Nonetheless, I started to feel like I was really tapping into this energy force that was allowing me to continue through the race. And I started to have these thoughts and these feelings come up, and I'm channeling them and letting them go. And I just knew that was all part of ultra running. I've competed at a high level before. These are not new feelings or experiences that I've had, and I've just felt them before, just in different arenas. And so I knew how to channel them, work through them, accept them, etc. Now my feet was causing me problems. The blistering, my calf was on fire. And so I got to that aid station, and it was a great relief. I felt that our crewing was pretty productive. We were quick. We were efficient. We were able to get me in and out of that first aid station. I did go to the bathroom, the porta potty, but I wasn't waiting much time there at that aid station. Then going to the next segment, we lost a bit of time in that next segment because it was a pretty good climb. We come back from that next segment. My feet weren't doing too well again. My calves were just absolutely killing me. And essentially, we were going into the next segment, going from 20.5 miles to 27 miles, essentially a 7 mile, 6.5 mile segment. I didn't realize that segment was also going to be the most climbing of any segment. About 100 yards starting into that segment from miles 20.5 to 27, I sprained my ankle really bad, rolled my ankle, and I felt it on the top of my foot, not actually in the ankle. So I thought that I potentially had maybe broken my foot. I've sprained my ankle dozens of times. It swells up like a balloon, but this one felt different. It was giving me a lot of pain in the bone area in my foot behind my big toe and the toe right next to it, whatever that toe is, whatever you call it, the middle finger. And that's not even the middle finger. Not even sure what that is called. Just the long toe that is longer than my big toe. That's the toe that I'm talking about. Okay. So I had pain essentially a little bit further back on that. Now I hit the wall at about mile 25 and a half. And we started descent from the top of that big climb. We started descent, we get to the bottom, and we made a costly mistake. We ran about 0.6 or so miles in the wrong direction. We thought the trail went right, but the trail actually went left. We show up into this trailhead. There's cars in the parking lot. I'm looking everywhere for my family, Jordan, an aid station sign, and they're nowhere to be found. And I'm like, dang. And going into this aid station, I was not in that good of a spot. And I said, knowing that I got to see my family just gave me life. So I had this big adrenaline spike. And then I get to this aid station and there was a dump. Then we had to backtrack ourselves. We got back to the trail. We had to make another climb. And then essentially we set ourselves about a little over a mile off track. We come into that aid station at mile 27, which we got there at 29. Okay, so essentially, or 27 and a half, we got there at 29, a mile and a half ahead of, or mile and a half more than what we're supposed to. Now, with all that considered, all right, is at that aid station going into mile 34, there's a hard cutoff at mile 34 that we needed to be there by 2:30. It was 1:20 when we arrived to that 27-mile mark. So it was essentially an 8.5-hour cutoff to make it 34 miles, which I've looked at other 50-milers and other ultras. In the eyes of most professional ultras, or even just like your above average ultra runner, you're like, dude, if you can't maintain 15-minute miles average with pit stops in an ultra, you're not doing it right. I hear you. I understand. I don't have an excuse. I definitely felt like we could have made the time. We made a lot of mistakes that cost us time, and I won't be making those mistakes in the future, and I'm going to learn from it. Nonetheless, we essentially had to do something that we had never done in any segment, and that was run 10-minute miles. Now, when we're going through some of this terrain, I'm freaking sitting there looking at this, and I'm like, we're not even going to get there. No matter how fast or hard that I wanted to run some of these sections, there was just no way that I was going to run some of these technical sections at 10-minute mile pace. Nonetheless, we did our best, and shout out to my now good friend that we shared a lot of miles with, Justin Medlin, who's an absolute quality human being, phenomenal person to be around, and somebody that gave me countless reminders of how grateful that we should be and that we are to be in the position to do hard things together and to do hard things as people and as men, and how God really is on our side. And we have voluntarily chosen to put ourselves in this position, and for us to accept that feeling, and for us to transcend that and essentially move through these feelings. And that's all that I did. As I was feeling pain in my foot, as I was feeling pain in my ankle, as I was feeling the pain of the blisters, as I was dry heaving every quarter mile, as my gut was aching, as I was sweating, as I was going through it, all I did was I took all of that pain and I put it into one bowl, and then I got out a spoon and I started to mix it together. Instead of thinking of each little thing and saying, I got this and I got this and I got this and I got this, in my mind, what I did is I put all the pain together. And for me to conceptualize the pain was for me to isolate it into one chunk and just accept it as one and not as many parts. That, my friend, was the best thing that I did for myself all day long, because I stopped worrying about this, I stopped worrying about that. And all I did was just saying, I'm accepting this pain. I'm in this experience. I know that this is going to be over at some point, whether it's 8.5 hours, 10.5 hours, 12.5 hours, this is going to be over at some point. So for the time being that I'm here right now, I'm going to do my best to accept the pain that I'm going through and know that I'm going to transform because of this. And so as that is happening, I'm dry heaving and I see Justin up the trail, and every now and then I could hear him yelling back and seeing if I was okay. And that was what propelled me through. That was the voice of reason that kept me going. And I'm so grateful that I had that partnership and that fellowship of somebody being selfless, because he won't say that I held him back, but man, oh man, he could have easily made that cutoff time. There was some times where we did have to stop because I was dry heaving, etc. And he probably could have made it. But nonetheless, shout out to Justin Medlin for it. So we missed the cutoff time at mile 34, which essentially I ran 35.41 miles because of the costly mistake that we essentially made. And we missed it. I missed it by 12 minutes. So essentially that 12 minutes was the difference between me being able to continue on to go to the next aid station and continue on the trek to make it 50 miles, or having to stop. At that point in time, I could have gone. It would have been an unofficial time. I could have completed the 50 miles. But my ego said, it's time to actually step in your humility now. At that aid station, my entire family was there. I rolled in there. I got to see my two beautiful little kids, my beautiful wife, my family, my brother-in-law and my sister flew in, my dad and his girlfriend flew. It was just an incredible opportunity to just sit down in a chair and be grateful for this moment and know that behind me I had such an incredible crew. I had such incredible support, and people, no matter what, if I'd ran 50 miles or didn't run 50 miles, that they would absolutely still love me. And it wasn't based off of the condition of me being an ultra runner or not being an ultra runner. So with that being said, my journey into ultra running is a bit unorthodox. I have learned that words are powerful and choose your words wisely. I've been provided a big dose of humility in all aspects of my life, not because I came up short. It's not why I wasn't given a dose of humility and humbled. It wasn't at all. I just learned to accept that things are hard. Sometimes you come up short of life, but that's just life, right? You have to work through these things in life, and you have to accept. And the biggest lesson I've learned is a lesson of surrendering. And that's why I brought up me surrendering to something greater than myself as I did by celebrating 7 years of sobriety and recovery on April 1st, 2026. And essentially, this is 3 weeks after I celebrated my 7th birthday, being birthed into consciousness. And what I've learned from that is serenity and acceptance is the most powerful things. And I asked him, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I'm not a biblical man. I do my best to lean into the spirit, something greater than myself, and my relationship with God. And I will continue to forge ahead in my life, and do my best as a man to lead by example, to begin to eliminate the weakness in flesh and lean more into spirit. And this entire process has done just that. And so if you've watched up to this point, I really appreciate your time, and your willingness to support me. And I will be back. I will absolutely put myself back in a position to accomplish the 50 miles, not because I need redemption, not because my ego needs it, but because I know that I'm capable of it. And when the timing allows, when it's meant for me to accomplish it, it'll happen. And I'm going to do everything that I can to put myself in a position for that to become a reality again. And then wherever it goes from there is out of my control. I'm just accepting it. And in this process, I'm becoming a better man. Do hard things voluntarily if you can, because many people don't have the choice or the option to do hard things, and they're living through hard things without having the choice. If you have the privilege, the choice, and the ability to do hard things, put yourself in those positions. You'll learn a lot about yourself. Appreciate you all. Thank you for watching. And I trust that somehow, some way, you found some resonance in this little story. Appreciate you guys.